Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Women Leaders Global Forum for inviting me. This is my first time at a forum, and I think for many of you also in Iceland, so it's a very great pleasure and honor. I'm very excited to chair such an important panel, which has as a core the change. And we talked about a lot of diversity and inclusiveness of women, of the gender equality, but this afternoon we will have, let's say, the privilege to have tangible examples of how actually the woman can be included thanks to this, what we call the digital revolution. So first of all, I would like to invite Choma Agwebo, who is the founder of Tech, her digital platform from Nigeria. Please. And then you can sit here. And then we have Isabelle Durand. She's the Deputy Secretary General of UNTAG, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. Welcome. You can sit here. And last but not least, Matt Granreed. He's the Director General of the GSMA, the Group Special Mobile Association industry platform that connects mobile industry in the world. This is the summarized definition of a very important platform which will help us to understand, first of all, the numbers, who actually sometimes dehumanize the very important subject and topic that we are tackling all day long, the gender equality. But let me introduce myself briefly, very modestly. I'm a journalist. I currently work at RAI, Radio RAI, but I'm Serbian. So I had to, let's say, face a double kind of a diversity to face and to struggle somehow with the double diversity that I'm incorporating somehow. First of all, I am a migrant, and I was very touched by the speech which came just after this panel of ours, because I fled from the war in the former Yugoslavia in 2000, and secondly, I'm a woman, so if we can call the gender and woman diversity still. So let's start with the sentence 2018, and we are still talking about the women issues as diversity, and we still tackle the main layer of our discussion, which is the gender inequality. We are talking about, our panel is named Women Changemakers in the Digital Revolution. What is the digital revolution, first of all, and how the women can be included and how can be helped by the digital revolution? First of all, maybe this year, 2018, started with the 2017, was the point of reference of what can we call the digital revolution. Let's start with the hashtag. We can be part of it, we can back it, or we can hate it, which is the Me Too movement, but we definitely are taking part somehow as a participant, as the observers of what is called the revolution of how do we look at the gender-based violence thanks to this Me Too movement. But there everlasting layer, maybe, that even with this Me Too movement, a digital revolution still remains the same, which is the gender inequality. And there are some proverbs which I would like to start our conversation this afternoon. We heard this morning one sentence which really influenced me a lot. More things change and more things stay the same. So maybe we can discuss about that. But I would like to mention another proverb which can go like this. Good things come to those who wait. But in terms of gender inequality, in terms of gender inclusion, I can say that we have to be impatient, and it can't work with this kind of a topic we are tackling today in these 3 days on a Women Leader Global Forum. So starting with impatience, I would like to start, first of all, I would also like to say that I'm very happy that we don't have a all-woman panel, and it's really something, it's not because of the quotas, but usually, and I think that this, like the vice versa quotas, but this forum really was very, put a great attention of this kind of a diversity, inclusiveness, but I really think that it's important to discuss even even though we are more women than men, on a forum that we discuss on each panel to be very aware of the fact that we don't have all women panel. But I would like to start not by emphasizing the men on the stage, but I would like to put on the floor to start with a general overview of what is the situation in terms of digital divide. So Mads Grainreard, in one of his presentation of GSMA, I look at the number. It really strike me a lot, because there is, as you said, there is estimated 200 million fewer men that owns a mobile phone. So let's start with this number, which doesn't have to be necessarily point of reference of a digital divide. But when we are talking about the exclusion, what we are talking about today.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. I think it's a great honor to be here, even though I feel a little bit lonely. And I guess that is the feeling that you women feel on other panels, which is normally the other way around. I represent the mobile industry. So the big operators, all the big operators globally is a member of GSMA. We're a global association. And it's quite remarkable, this impatient thing. If you go back 20 years, and I'm sure many of us in this room remember 20 years ago, it was hardly 5%, maybe 3% of the world's population at that time that had a mobile phone. 20 years later, now, we are connecting 2/3 of everyone on this planet, so 5.5 billion people or thereabouts. It's a tremendous growth. And so that's fantastic in its own right. But the real magic happens when this device becomes the window to the internet, because then I become included in the future of society. So today we're very close to having 50% of the world's population on internet, predominantly through a mobile device, and 50% that is not on a mobile or not on internet. So if we look at the 50% that is on internet, that is, and we look at the gender split, because we believe, and I think we all agree, that internet should be open, it should be free, it should be something that we all can enjoy and thrive from. But that is not the case when it comes to gender. If we look at the 25 low and middle income countries in the world, roughly 24% fewer women than men are accessing internet through this. So it's quite a big difference. And it's a huge regional difference as well. If you take South Asia, for instance, it's 70%. If you take Sub-Saharan Africa, it's 40%. If you take Argentina, in Buenos Aires, it's 50-50. Everyone is sort of equal in Buenos Aires. But if you go out to rural Argentina, it's 30%. So it's both rural versus urban, and it's also different regions. So it is really pertinent to work on why that is. Because the fear I have, the fear the industry has, is that we are, through the advancement of technology, creating this artificial divide from a technology perspective. And this is the best freedom seeker, freedom device that I think we have invented, which is including people. Yeah.
Which is including people, but you in GSMA are doing something in the tangible way which really includes women. If I'm not wrong, Connected Women Commitment Initiative is one of the examples of this tackling digital divide.
Yeah. We do a lot of things. We do Women for Tech, which is a program that we run 3 times a year. We do Girls for Tech, which is a similar thing to emphasize the importance of attracting people, women predominantly, to STEM education. And why do we do this? Well, I think it is multiple different reasons, but maybe the most important one is that, you know, this industry is high on educated people, and we need to dip into 100% of the talent pool. Today, we're only dipping into almost 50%. Right? So that is not enough. We need to have all the best brains in this industry. And if I've tried to understand how many men versus women are on this conference, and I think it's sort of 90% women, 10% men,
yeah, we were
which is slightly worse than my industry, the mobile industry, where we have 19% women and 81% men. So, you know, it's not too far away from where we are here. So we have a lot of work to do to augment this talent pool.
In order to talk about this digital revolution, which is the core of our discussion. There is another number which really struck me a lot this morning. Mr. Barroso said, it was mentioned that he battled a lot. He made a great fight in order to reach this 30% of women present in the European Commission. 30%, it's not enough, and impatience can be also connected to this number in 2018. But let's make some step backward in order to recontextualize in terms of number, but in terms of what happened since the Barroso's times and maybe since the 2000s. Isabel Durant was now is the Deputy Secretary General, I said, of United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. But you were the first Ministry of Transport in Belgium. What does it mean for a woman, for such a, let me be politically incorrect on this stage, such a male position? What does it mean, and what kind of a, not digital, but analog revolution you made in your work?
Well, thank you for your question, because of course it's a long time ago, 99, 2004.
But important to observe
yes,
this present.
It's a very special position because it's a double stigma. I was the first woman in this transportation sector, and I was the first in my party to be member of a government. So it was a double stigma, and all the actors of the transport sector, when the decision of my mandate was taken, said, oh, what's that? We have to work with a woman and with a, because I'm a green woman, that's crazy. We will never succeed with that. So it was a very difficult beginning. But working with truck drivers, with railways work, with dockers, with all those people, 99% of men, it's not an easy task. But what I would like to explain is that sometimes it could be an advantage. But an advantage
to be a minority.
To be a minority and to be a minority in this sector. Why? But there are some conditions. Because if you are able, first of all, to kill your worst enemy, which is sometimes your own lack of trust in yourself. That's the first thing that you have to kill. Secondly, that you could be aware on your power or the balance of power in your situation. That's very important. Thirdly, if you are able as women, if we are able as, because I speak for all of us, if we are able to not to take the habits, the male habits, but to be as we are. To be as we are, as a woman, with all competencies, with all lack, of course, but be as you are helps you to put the other out of their comfort zone. And it was a case because I had a big problem with strike, with a big strike of drivers, truck drivers, so all the city was completely blocked. And to manage and to negotiate the things with them, be as you are, and trying avoid to take the habit of the man helps to find a solution at the end of the negotiation. So I think that it could be an advantage to be a woman, even in a male sector, if you are able to use this advantage properly and try to take benefit of that and not to be a victim of a male sector which don't like you or will exclude you. It could not be the case. So my experience is that it could be an advantage if you are able to take advantage of this position in a male sector, but especially stay a woman. And don't take the habits, the necessary habit of men, because it's not useful. It will not help you in what you have to do, and especially if you are in a minority. So that's the lesson that I learned about this experience.
18 years ago, but maybe today, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe we can expire in not being any more diversity, not taking advantage of our being a minority, but actually you open the floor towards this kind of and I think that
even in the digitalization world and the figures that you just given show how it's important to fulfill this gap. But I think that if we are able to do on the same criteria that I just mentioned, I think that it could help us to be part of this, of course, education and all of those things. But I think that what you explained with your figures, it reinforced the gaps existing before between the rural and urban areas, etc., etc. But the digitalization could reinforce that, so we have to change that. And to do that, we have to be impatient and work as we are, as women.
As a woman, to be impatient, and I will add another thing. We are talking about the digital revolution and how to include women within the digital environment and how digital tools can help this gender equality. But we have to tackle, first of all, the basic questions, the basic stuff like inequality, gender pay gap. And we will tackle it afterwards. But now, from the general point of view, starting from the numbers, starting with this, let's call it history case study and experience, there is a small but an important initiative which really brings some change in terms of a tangible example of this digital revolution, which brings us to Nigeria, with Choma Agwebo, who is the founder of TechHer. So I will stop here. I would directly ask you, what is TechHer and why we can include it in this digital revolution, at least in Nigeria?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me at this really fantastic conference. So TechHer is a community of learning, support, and collaboration for women who either use technology as the core of their functions or they use it as an enabler for the things that they do. And our theory of change is simple. In the same way that women, mothers, whether they're single mothers or married, anything, the same way that mothers transfer culture and transfer tradition and transfer religion to their children, if I'm able to get my peers, so fellow women, to understand how the simplest bits of technology enable their lives and make their lives simpler, they will naturally pass this on to their children. This is the founding principle for TechHer, because I realized that in 2015, there was a lot of advocacy, bring girls into tech. And I thought about myself and I said, I'm not a girl, so what about me? What about the class of us who have left secondary school or high school or have finished university but still do not or cannot access any technological innovation? And so we thought about, how do we bring women together, our peers, and show them the simple ways technology can help them advance their political careers, entrepreneurship. And in Nigeria, we have a lot more female entrepreneurs than we have male. And I think this sits across Africa as well. But a lot of these women function in very informal, informal situations. So they are not registered. They are unable to go beyond a certain ceiling because of the absence or the lack of access to technology. And this is the community that TechHer caters to. It's essentially just bringing them into these spaces and showing them how we can create safe spaces for them to learn about technology, for them to see that you don't have to code. You don't have to be a web developer, but you need to understand how you can apply technology to the things that you do every day, and that's what makes your life better.
It impressed me a lot while we were talking about your initiative before the panel about this perception, which might be connected to the previous example of Isabelle Durand, of how tech industry and how this digitalization is also male observed by women. So what about this kind of situation in Nigeria? Can you contextualize a little bit the environment, the digital environment in Nigeria?
So, just like a number of other places, both on the continent and outside Africa, technology expertise sits with men. And there are a lot of stereotypes that have been perpetrated over the years. Technology is a man's job, it's not for women, it's dirty, it's too much work, etc. But you cannot solve a problem you don't know anything about. And no matter how much men try to empathize with women, they will never truly understand, for instance, what a period feels like, right? They will never truly understand what it means to be trolled as a woman who's running for office and someone's slut-shaming you. And these are the specific challenges that women who have a good grasp of technology can start to apply solutions to, can start to develop innovation to tackle, whether it is creating safe spaces for people to talk about their experiences and talk about how they've surmounted these challenges, or whether it's creating technological solutions about how to protect ourselves online, right? And so things like cybersecurity, etc., how to react or cater to ourselves when we're being trolled, etc. etc. There's a specific context. There's a proverb in Nigeria that says you cannot wash both hands with only one hand. And so we constantly need to bring both hands together, men, women, not countering inequality with inequality, but these two need to come together and work as an indivisible monolith to create the solutions that we seek.
And let's start precisely from this point with Matt's grand read, because we were saying digital divide, but another burden to overcome is gender pay gap, actually. So what about this male perceived and everlasting male also generated tech industry environment? So how do you tackle this problem, and especially gender pay gap in terms of tech industry and women presence within the tech industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically what I said earlier. I mean, we have 19% in the mobile industry. ICT is a little bit better. It's 25%. But it's not a brilliant number.
Because you pushed it, or it was like the natural...
No, I mean, we are pushing, obviously, because what I said earlier about the talent pool. But also there is a numerous amount of studies showing that, I remember one study from Morgan Stanley 2 years ago where they had analyzed 110 tech companies. And the companies that have a higher degree of equal between men and women actually made a 5.4% higher net profit. So I mean, I think the evidence is quite clear that having a more two-hands approach is very beneficial for shareholders, for employees, and for customers. Because I agree with you, there are a spurring momentum and movement of having more female entrepreneurs that are doing things slightly differently. And I think you said the same thing, and that is highly, highly appreciated. And when it comes to gender pay gap, since we are a global organization based in the UK, we disclose our gender pay gap, and it is
published on your website.
Yeah, it's published, and which I think is absolutely the right thing. And we still have a pay gap, but it's very minimal. At GSMA, we are actually 50-50 from an employee perspective. And of course, the higher up the hierarchy you get, the more men. So that is something we have to work with. Yeah. But the gender pay gap is almost equal now. So we're working diligently with it. But I think that's an area where one needs to have some patience, because you can't do this overnight. But you need to work forcefully every year to try to change it. Because you don't want to have a quota system. I mean, when you said that I had a quota to be here, I felt, oh, well, I was hoping that it would be something else than just a quota. So I can understand.
Also.
Yeah, I know exactly, yeah. So we cannot, I don't think that quota is the right way to go. Maybe we need to have it, but it's not.
But
right.
Maybe it's a necessary,
like
a 0 point in terms of
Yeah.
tackling. And thank you very much for another point which I would like to emphasize. You said we don't have a huge gender pay gap, but we still are lacking the women in the leadership positions. Yeah. It really impressed me a lot. I was attending a very similar meeting last week in Strasbourg in a Council of Europe, where you have a very strong women presence in a leadership position, but still the president and director general, of Council of Europe is a man. So Isabelle Durand, you worked, and if I'm not wrong, you were the vice president of the Euro Parliament from 2009. And how things has changed in terms of your experience of women taking part of in a leadership positions, and how the digital industry, we are talking here about the digital revolution, can help to also break this burden towards and to make another step forward in terms of gender equality.
But in the political life globally, it was the case, and it is the case in the European Parliament, and also in a lot of parliaments in the world. We have some quota. It depends on the countries and the laws, but I think that it's a step. It's probably not. I hope that it's not for the eternity, but well, it's a step, and it's why in some parliament there are more women, and not enough, but more. But I will come back to what you said about the women in the private sector and in the companies, because it's true that in Africa, and UNCTAD is working a lot with developing countries regarding digitalization, etc. why they are always limited to small enterprise, small company, micro credits, micro enterprise. That's a problem. There are, of course, there is a lot of women who have a very benefic effect on their community, because they are working, when they are working in a small business, there is effect on the community. But it's not enough. Of course, I respect all those women, courageous women, but I mean that we need that the women could be involved not only in micro project, but in macro project, and could be part of the decision in the top of the companies, the biggest company, even in Africa. They are in the informal sector, and well, small trade, small activity, micro credits, etc., or micro e-commerce, because that's also something that is important for women. E-commerce or e-trade is a way to bypass the male network, because when you are in direct relationship with your client without having the mandatory using of the network with men in the Chamber of Commerce in some countries where it's only male network, or, well, I think that the direct contact with your client is an advantage, but I would like that we could also encourage women and help women to be part of the top decision. And when you said it's not well, at the first stage, necessary that the woman could know the coding, but at the end, if we want to have more women in the digital sector, we have to have women in the creative aspect of digitalization, not only be client or user of the digitalization, but be in capacity to
Maybe
create.
we need to tackle the perception of this kind
absolutely.
of
Exactly.
And I think that if women were more involved from the beginning in the coding, in the way to develop the system, probably it could change also the way to use it, and also the way of the men to use it. But, well, it's a long, there is a long way to go today.
Exactly.
Because
and it is a multifaceted journey, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
So we already have a problem, and it's how do we face this problem from a number of angles. So there's the advocacy that caters to young girls getting into STEM education, and that's one way for them to start from the beginning. But what happens to those of us who weren't exposed to the STEM advocacy? And these are the ones who need to get comfortable with it, so that when they have children who are girls, we don't need to start that advocacy all over again with bringing those girls into technology. Why? Because their mothers will pass it on to them in the same way they pass foods to eat, clothes to wear, and habits and behavioral, and attitudes and things like that. But just to respond, to something you were saying about
small,
being, just
because
about small
you are
businesses.
doing something which is much broader.
And I think TechHer's legal counsel is in the audience. One of the things we've done last year, which we're also going to do next year, is to help women register these businesses. If you're not registered with the Chamber of Commerce, for instance, for all of those bodies, you don't exist, and you will remain micro, right? And so one of the things we've done, which we're going to do again, is to bring them together and say what is it that you do, and how can we help you get registered to the point where you can get a government loan, you can be in a place where you're ready to scale. How do we get you to a point where you can actually start to have some of these larger level conversations, as opposed to remaining a small business running solely on Instagram, as opposed to remaining a small business that's not going more than, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000 a year. So all of these things, but again, I do believe that this is a journey. We're coming from a point of great deficiency, and the idea is not to make it look so magnificent or so large that it becomes scary. And so it's to take them, just like the Bible says, line upon line, precept upon precept, and it's an entire journey with with a multifaceted approach.
And we have a final 2 minutes in order to just develop a little bit our journey. Yes, this is a journey, but it has to be a journey on a broader and a general level. So how can we bring this gender equality in a digital world on a global level? Matt?
Wow. Well,
1 minute.
Well, at least what is your expectation for the future?
I actually think events like this, events like the one we have in Barcelona, Mobile World Congress, because to create a systemic change, we need to be able to foster cross-collaboration between many different entities, between civil society, between governments, between private sector, etc., to really raise the awareness of this issue. And it's not from a pity perspective. It is from a financial perspective. It is from a human perspective. It is from a talent pool perspective. That's my 45 seconds.
Okay. Isabella, what is your dream and how we can go global with this issue?
My dream is that digitalization could become the heart of development, because we need that in order to help the LDC or the last developed countries to jump in it. And to do that, I think that we need to change the culture, not only the law. Of course, we are doing a lot regarding law, but even when the law is voted, adopted in the parliament, implementation of the law means that the people have to have in mind that they could apply the law, because sometimes they are against the law because the cultural aspect are not ready, or the cultural heritage is not allow not the woman to be part of it. So I think that digitalization have to become really heart of development, and of course women try to be able really to jump in it through culture and not only through law.
Thank you very much for bringing that aspect, which is very important, the cultural aspect, which might be overcome by...
especially in the matriarchal societies, even if you have the best law,
but maybe
sometimes the people and even the women are against the implementation of the law, because it was like that in the past. So
and digital revolution might help us in that. Chioma?
I think for me, my dream is to be able to come here in 5 years. I know this is the inaugural meeting. My dream is to be able to come here in 5 years with a bunch of women who have passed through TechCar and other such organizations who have then gone on to take leadership positions, whether in parliament or whether at federal levels, because they become a part of a global network that's powerful, that helps them, that provides a lot of support, provides them with opportunities to learn, but most importantly, provides them with opportunities to collaborate with other women, both within the continent and beyond.
And my dream, if I'm allowed to say, I really hope, I don't want to be politically incorrect, but like maybe in 10 years, not to have decounters like this, but to be more inclusive and not to talk about the gender inclusiveness anymore. And maybe it might sound very utopic, but as I will use the Steve Jobs sentence, stay hungry, stay foolish, but stay impatient. That's maybe the most important thing. Thank you very much for participating.